generation. Gemini is here to walk us through the many pros and cons to embracing Pardot business units, as well as a couple of gotchas. So we hope to have time for Q&A at the end of the session. So please post your questions in the Q&A tab at the top right of your screen. Okay, over to you, Tracy.
Thank you. Right. Okay.
Do you see that present button?
I have found it. I'm in process, pressing me bits and bobs.
There we go.
Let me just go to that window myself. So wait, number one, I'm not looking at myself. Now I can look at the actual presentation, and then we can slideshow it.
There we go. Okay, I'm gonna head off. Okay, I'm heading off stage.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, welcome everyone to my session on Pardot business units. Let's crack on. So my name is Tracy Keeling. I work as a senior marketing consultant at Capgemini. I've been with them about a year, no, almost 2 years now. Oh my goodness, that's gone quick. And I've been working with Pardot for about 8 or 9 years now. So definitely been there, done it quite a few times. And Pardot business units are something that are really, really useful, but also have their pros and cons, as we're about to discuss. So let's go for it. I'll have to show this slide. So I'm quickly, just an agenda, rough idea. So we're going to talk about what are Pardot business units, and then when's a good time to actually use them, so when we should actually consider them, the pros and cons of them, and a few little gotchas that I've come across. And just a few little things to note through the presentation. You may see these acronyms or words. So PBU does mean Pardot business unit. That's actually the terminology used throughout Salesforce for this piece of kit. So you might see that in various places. That's what it means. So I'm old school. I'm an old fart. I've been doing this a bit too long. So the likelihood of me at this moment in time remembering to say Marketing Cloud account engagement or account engagement is very unlikely. So Pardot will be the word used, but that's what it means. Also, I'm hopeful that you all know what SF stands for, and that will be Salesforce. Apologies for my blurry images and my dog who's about to start barking, which is really frustrating. Unfortunately, I couldn't get any better ones on here for the moment. So if you just look at this. So we've got the, what is a Pardot business unit? So basically, a Pardot business unit is a Pardot org. So you will have, I'm going to have to sort the dog out. I do apologise. Oh, no, I didn't mean to do that. Right. So unprofessional of me. Right, okay. So a Pardot business unit is actually an individual Pardot org. So this is Salesforce's way of enabling us to quite easily connect more than one Pardot org to Salesforce. And obviously, by doing it and calling them business units, they've then started to add some great more new stuff onto that to make it much more user-friendly. And there's lots more things coming down the line to improve all that kind of side of things. And as Pardot becomes much more a part of Salesforce, everything improves. So the location to see how many business units you've got or to see what they're called is called, so if you go into the normal Salesforce setup, type in Pardot account setup, then this is where you'll come to, and that's where you'll see your individual business units. And that's where you can add an extra one as well at the bottom there if you want to. So when's a great time to start considering business units? So obviously everyone likes to, think about these new toys and they want to have them and whether it's a good idea. The times when you should be considering it, when you've got your one business unit or two and you want to expand even further, is when you're starting to hit usage limits. So Pardot has certain limits on certain types of functionality. Some of them are bendable, or you can pay Salesforce for a little bit more. Apologies. So yeah, you can pay for a little bit more. Others, which are quite important, is the new. So you've got engagement studios where you can actually do repeatable ones. You only have, and I've forgotten the number, it's either 10 or 20. So it's a really small number. So you are likely to hit that limit. And that's one of those times where, you know, the only way you could get more of those is to actually have another business unit. Another really important one is data sharing. So in Pardot, you can get to every single prospect. So even though you've got the ability to add security on folders and, you know, so that they only look at certain lists and you can make it work that way, which is quite an old thing, actually. Many people don't know about that. But that only hides lists. It doesn't actually hide prospects. So if you know an email address or a person's name, even if you're not able to see them in Salesforce, you would be able to find them in Pardot. So there is no sort of restrictions on the data that you can find within Pardot. So if you need to have that kind of segmentation, it's really important. And that would be another good reason to look at business units. And brand and geographic are very similar. You know, brands can be geographically aligned, but quite often they're different, but the same reasons really. It's about, you know, it makes it easier to, you've got one pot for this brand and another pot for that brand, or geographically, it makes sense. Geographically also comes down to things like GDPR rules and things like that. It's, you know, if you're trying to adhere to different data privacy laws, that sometimes can be a very good reason to look at segmentation. It depends on kind of how your setup is and the levels of detail that you're already going into and where you're starting to hit problems. So the pros. So not a huge list sat here, but very, very important stuff, right? So when you come to using the new business units, it obviously, as I've been talking about, it makes the segmentation very much easier, not only from the point of view of content, so around emails that you may want to sort of set up. So, you know, you might have this great email that you want to create, but you don't want this other brand to see it, or people working in different areas. There might actually be a level of competition within the business, the overall business, but not on separate brands, that you actually do want to keep them separate for those reasons as well. And as we've talked about, the security reasons around data segmentation. But another great thing is that it actually also allows you to segment the users. So you've got the ability to sort of have, right, these users only have access to this business unit and these users only have access to that business unit. So it gives that clear cut ability. Obviously, there is the also the ability to have access to both. So you're not completely restricted, but you have the control as to what they do have access to. And obviously, as soon as you add another business unit, you are then increasing your you know, number of engagement studios you can have. So you've got that ability to have all those extra ones all over again. So that's great. Another great thing is that you can actually have, so within each Pardot.org, you can have a default tracker domain. So you can only have one, obviously, default. And if you've got like lots of different brands and you're trying to have them in one business unit, that can be quite challenging because you've got to remember to change the domain the whole time. Whereas if you've got separate orgs, you can have a different default per org. So that enables, that also helps with that kind of side of things. The cons. Right, okay. I know this list is bigger. It's not meant to be depressing. It isn't depressing. It's just that the list is extensive, but it doesn't mean they're any more powerful than the pros that were on the last page. It just means that there's a few more things to think about. So, and number one at the top of the list is cost. So it's something really that does need to be considered on all levels. So not just, so obviously there's that obvious cost of, well, now I'm, you know, if you're going to have another business unit, you've got to pay for it, right? So there is an extra business unit cost there. The other, so that's just, you know, that's just the nature of the beast. But then you've also got to think about every time you want to do something, there is an extra design implication that needs to happen there, because you've got to design how that works across the two different places. And anytime you go to do something, you have to consider, does it affect that both of them, one of them, or neither of them, rather than just, does it affect Pardot? So it adds an extra element to what you're thinking about. And then how do I share it with this one but not that one? Those kind of things need to be considered. And then on top of that, obviously, then comes, once you've got the design side of it, when you're coming to build things, anything you're doing in Salesforce as well as Pardot, you need to think about, you're going to have to either do it if it needs to be done in Pardot, have you got to do it twice rather than once? Because obviously, if you do something in one Pardot business unit, it's not replicated or movable easily into the other one. You have to do it all over again. So there's no ability to sort of share that. There is stuff coming. There is certain things that you can do, with your landing pages and email. If you're using the Lightning email builder template, you can now share emails across business units, but you can't with landing pages yet. And when I say yet, by the way, that's not on the roadmap that I'm aware of. I'm just being positive. I have positive frame of mind, positive thinking. It will happen. So you can't share those kind of content, so that all those kind of things you have to build twice, and so it adds an extra layer of time and cost all around those kind of side of things. Right. So on the maintenance side of things, so that's cost, and then there's other things. So we've got a default tracker domain that we can have per org now. So that's per Pardot or per Pardot business unit. However, you can't have the same one on both. So sometimes that's not a good thing. So that's just one thing. So obviously, other one around maintenance is the impact on the core setup. So obviously, you're going to have to. There's more to consider. There's more. When you actually add a user, there's more to do, because you add the user now in Salesforce for Pardot. So with your user sync setup, so it adds more complexity to around what you're doing, making sure that they're going into the right business unit. There's extra steps to take place when you're trying to add them to extra business units, and you need to make sure it's all set up. Also, when it comes to contacts, leads, and users, but more importantly as well, you can't actually see from the user record, contact record, or lead record which business unit that by default. So you can set stuff up, but by default, that information isn't there. So you have to then think, right, most people want to see that. So it's only a matter of building a custom field or doing something like that. But those are things that you have to remember to do, have to think about, have to set up. There's just extra little bits like that, but there are lots of things to consider, and visually other things that you might want as well. The other thing as well is you can't share prospects across BUs. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail later, but that's just one really important thing to consider. And also, as I was saying, around user management, when you're starting to go across lots of different business units, it becomes quite difficult to manage that automatically or anything like that. And all of these, obviously, you've got your poor administrator, Salesforce administrator sat there doing all this. It's adding to the time. Both Salesforce and Pardot, there's lots of things, that it will take extra time. Everything takes more, because there's more to think about, more to consider, more to check too. And then the other problem you have is the more business units you have, the more likelihood of things happening slightly different on each business unit. Which you're like, oh, well, that's fine. They can go off and do their own thing. But the problem is when you then want to roll that information up in Salesforce on your campaigns and start to compare, you want to be able to compare apples and apples, not apples and pears. And that's where you start to hit challenges, because if people are setting things up slightly different, running their processes differently in different orgs, then you're going to hit those challenges. And I'm sure you probably, you could have had them in one org, but it was easier to manage because it's all in one place and everyone's sort of got the same starting point, if you like, whereas in the different orgs it becomes harder it's more to manage. So it's not necessarily wrong, but there's just more. So the gotchas. Contact sharing. So I did just start talking about that on the other page. Oh no, what happened there? Go back. Finger happy. So contact sharing. So what's happening in effect is that you cannot share a contact or a lead across business units by default. Now there is a way around this. So in Pardot, you now have this ability where you can tick on the connector to stop it sharing the Pardot fields onto the contact. And then what that means is you then need to create a Salesforce custom object, put those fields on that, and then update those fields. So you need a record on that custom object per business unit, and then the API needs to update that. not straightforward. I've not done it yet, but I do have a customer who I'm looking at doing it for, which is super exciting. So hopefully next year I can come back and talk to you about having done that. So we're looking at doing that. So that's really exciting. And hopefully we'll see where that goes. So that's quite a, and just to give you a little bit of context around that, that's a global recruitment company who are using Pardot business units by region. And it's about the people, so it's about the clients coming to us going, we want you to fill a job. But those clients will have, they may be based in Europe, but they want you to fill a job for them in Africa. And at the moment, that doesn't work because that's cross-region. And so those are all getting lost at the minute. So we need to make it so that we can actually now start to, they're a global company. They need to start behaving globally when it comes to them B2B business marketing. So, and the only way we're going to really be able to do that is by doing that sharing. But that's one of the implications that we've come across of going to multiple business units. If we'd have been in one business unit, that would never have been an issue. But the volume of contacts, the volume of automations we want to do, there was just no way you could stay in one. It needed to be split. So there was, and there's lots of brands involved as well. So I won't go into any more detail out on that on this talk because we can talk about that next time. And yet another gotcha. So the B2B analytics app, great, cool little bit of kit that you get for free, enables you to see your campaign influence, campaign attribution. Love it. Absolutely think it's a really cool bit of kit. However, only works for one business unit for free. So, not free, it comes as part of your Pardot package. However, as soon as you add a second business unit, it can't report on it. So it can still report on the initial one business unit, but it cannot report on two business units. It can if you pay for full analytics licenses. So you have to have full Salesforce analytics licenses, so paid, to be able to look at more than one business unit in that app, because you have to make so many amends and do so much, which you don't have access to for free. So another one is the sending IP. So you can have it's a paid for thing. You can have a dedicated sending IP, but that's actually only valid on one business unit. So you'd have to pay for another one on another business unit. So that's something to notice. And then when you want to do sharing of users, so no, I don't mean sharing of users. What I mean is when you are, so if you want to be a user in two business units, that requires what's called user sync to work. Is that what I mean? Yes, I think that's what it's called. And to utilize that, both business units need to be on the V2 connector. So that's the more recent connector. So if you're not, if you're going to go to multiple business units, you need to be able to use the business unit switcher. And that switcher requires all of the business units to be on the V2 connector. And lastly, but certainly not, well, it is tiny, but it was super important to me. And that's actually the whole reason that this talk came together initially, is to talk about this little thing, this little error to do with user sync sharing. And it's just a little thing that I really wanted to share with everyone. But because it was, my little thing, I thought I'll give it its own page. So we'll talk about it on its own page. So the story here was around, so this came up for me. So this is again for this global recruitment company. They were set up so this is all Salesforce functionality. So in Salesforce, the role hierarchy was set up so that the lowest level in the role hierarchy was France. And within the within the user sharing, so obviously on the business unit, when you go to manage users, which you can see here, you come down to this bit here and you edit the user assigned. On the marketing users here, we had France, but it said France roles and internal subordinates. So that's fine, right? So then what they've decided was they actually didn't want to assign anyone to France. They wanted to assign people to, say, North France and South France, which they made as roles below France. So, and then we were like, why isn't none of this working? Why has it stopped all the syncing? All these records aren't working anymore. They're not, these users aren't there, we don't understand what's happened. What's happened is, because when we added that France role to the business unit, those subordinate roles did not exist. Salesforce stroke Pardot is not checking for updates to the role hierarchy. So because when they added France, North France and South France didn't exist as an option, it doesn't consider them as roles that are there as internal subordinates. So it didn't work. So I had to actually go in, and then I could have just removed that and then added it back in and it would have picked it up. But I just added the North and South France in. But that was the issue. It's actually not. So this, when you put roles and internal subordinates in, it's only those that are there at that moment in time. It doesn't track changes. Tiny little thing, but really annoyed me. But I thought it was really important that I share it, just because it's one of those things that it's like, oh, thanks for that. I would never have found that. That would have driven me nuts as to, because what it did was we had assignment engagement studios and automations that were assigning to these people, and it was actually stopping records coming into Salesforce because it couldn't see those users. So it was quite a big implication, really. Yeah. So after all that incredibly large amounts of waffle, I feel like I've been talking for ages. I will just give my overall thoughts. So business use, I've called them a great new piece of kit, but they've been around for ages now. Yeah, that's what I've just said. So, and they're a really good thing, right? They're self-solving problems, make life a lot easier in many ways, make things a lot tidier, are a lot better for segmentation of data and storing things and stuff like that. But there is a lot to consider before you do it. So don't, it's a great thing. It has a lot of value to add, but it has a lot of cost involved too. And there are a few like important gotchas, especially like that, the contacts not sharing. The contacts not sharing across those business units may have a massive impact on how you decide to split your business units. Because, if you're going to do it by brand, but you've got a lot of people who are across two brands, then really, do you want to go down that road? Because then you've got to think about the costs of setting up that API, setting up the code involved in making that work, the maintenance of that, because that's non-flexible stuff, right? The one thing you don't want to do is be going creating stuff that is taking up a lot of processing power and is going to be always doing that. It's not to say that you shouldn't, but there has to be enough value in doing so. How big is your company? How is it good? Is there going to be a good enough return on investment? And that's why it's really important that there's a strong risk and benefits analysis done to make sure that actually you are going to get the benefits out of this, because it looks like it will make things really nice and tidy, and it will, but there are costs involved. But then again, some of your risks may be reputational, they may be legal. So it may actually be, sometimes we just got to do it. There's no choice. We have to suck up the cost. So there's those kind of things to think about. Also, what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes Salesforce is now, and Pardot, so intrinsically linked now. Some of the things you might want to do might be possible in other ways, using automation, lightning pages, components, that kind of thing. So, just take your time to really assess all the options and make sure that doing a business unit is the right thing. It's a great piece of kit. It's super useful. It's really needed in lots and lots of different places, but there's a lot to consider. So just make sure that you do. And I'm very sorry for all that waffle. Oh, but is there any questions? Or has anyone actually got any additional gotchas to share as well, more importantly?
Thank you so much for that, Tracy. We did have a couple of questions posted. So Stacy was wondering, if you have a Pardot Premium Edition that comes with 75,000 prospect limit, is that 75K per business unit, or is it 75 spread across the 5 BUs, or however many you have?
Oh, I think it's on each business. Well, it depends on. So it depends on your contract, really. I think that's more of a definite Salesforce. I mean, I would be looking at, because on your each individual Pardot business unit, in the usage and limits will tell you the limit in that org.
Yeah, she said the contract is 75K.
So that would be split across all the business units then.
Okay. Thank you. And then Barack asked, what's the best way to handle a client who has business units for different regions with a procurement director in each region, but they also have a global procurement director that sits on the main board for the region overall? Should they be added into the, you know what, I'm actually going to just share this. Oh, I can't share it.
Hey? Trust
Best way
Barack.
to handle a client who has BUs from regions, EMEA, APAC, Americas, with a procurement director for each, but they also have a global procurement director that sits on the main board in EMEA. Do they get added to the EMEA business unit?
Yeah, I suppose so. It depends on the. I couldn't handle a client who has BUs from regions. When you mean procurement director, I'm not sure what you're trying to say. So they've got like, I wouldn't be managing that by, the procurement director. What do you mean?
Yeah, Barack, if you want to pop into the chat and add some more details, we can dig deeper in.
Yeah, because if you're wanting to see the information, I'm more thinking that would be done by your Salesforce campaigns, and you'd just be rolling that up. So you have the data stored in the individual business units on those campaigns, and then you roll the data up into your global one so that they can look at whatever's being said.
Yeah, so this person is a buyer, he said.
A buyer. Sorry, I'm thinking. So they're someone who would be a prospect. So we're talking about them being prospects.
Not sure.
Yeah, I mean this is a challenge, right? Because this is one that I it's almost like because we've got this, funnily enough, also with this recruitment company, and they want to stick with individual regional ones, and like they're in a particular region, and then we're going to try and share them across the other ones. But I just feel that has a lot of challenges around communications and other stuff as well. And funnily enough, on the Marketing Cloud, so we've got Marketing Cloud and Pardot on this particular customer. But on Marketing Cloud, they've got a global one and then all the regional ones. And I'm like, why have we not got a global Pardot? And that's just because no one wants to pay for it, not because actually that's not what the correct answer is. So if I had all the money in the world, I would probably be having a global Pardot and then the regional ones. But you have to make some good rules around how you would set that up.
Yeah, so they are a prospect. They don't have a global business unit. There is a global buyer who manages the other buyers in EMEA, APAC, and Americas. Yeah, so without that top level global business unit, where do you seat the global buyer, I think is what you're asking, Barack.
Yeah, probably in where they're situated, and then you just have to share them, either be able to share them across the other ones or not. That's the chat. That's when it comes down to those. That's when that code is. That's quite frustrating, and I'm hoping. I'd like to think that further down the line, Salesforce realizes there's actually quite a lot of demand for being able to see across multiple business units, and that, or they're expecting someone to provide that in the app exchange, as a extra add-on piece of kit that we can get. Because that's quite, being able to sort of sync that up to the business units. Because also, because I know a consultancy has already done it so that you can see all the engagement history, because you can only see engagement history across one business unit, but you can actually see they've set something up so that they've got prospects in each business unit, obviously not synced to Salesforce, and then that's they can show that engagement in Salesforce against the contact.
Right, and we're just about out of time. But Irina posted that one gotcha they came across is that once a user has an account in more than one business unit, they no longer can access links from pi.pardot.com.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's, yeah.
yeah, and
That's true.
she also wanted clarification on the role refresh issue. So that's related to a custom Pardot role that you created, and it's just
No,
that Salesforce automatically.
it was a Salesforce role. Sorry, it's a Salesforce.
Okay.
It was all in Salesforce, so it was a Salesforce role hierarchy. So when you add manage users in Salesforce, manage users on the Pardot business units, it's based on the Salesforce role hierarchy.
Okay.
And
We are at the time. I'm sorry.
oh, okay.
Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Okay. Thank you, Tracy.
No problem. Love to
Okay.
speak to everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.